Goddamn, it's Friday at roughly 4 o'clock, give or take, Central Time. Close enough for government work. It's time for happy hour. That was a hell of a text session that we just jammed through.
Yeah.
But by the way, we are joined by Matt Donnelly of the Ice Cream Social podcast, who had a curious question he wanted to bring up. But normally, Justin, I
believe today I am star of Hitting the Nuts. Is the guest that you have on your podcast today?
Indeed. Normally, I get real anxious with teching stuff out, but it's like I'm so excited that today the internet weather gods are smiling upon us that it's like I didn't even mind it. I'm like, let's shoot for the sun. Let's do this.
All right. So this particular edition of Happy Hour comes to you by way of a group text that was sent by Matt, because we have spent most of this week in one fashion or another discussing his 2010 comedy Hitting the Nuts. And now we finally cap the week with the star himself. Matt, congratulations. I've only seen the trailer, but it was great.
Apologies to your listeners for the worst week-long programming in the history of podcasting.
Well, what are you talking about? We finally had a mystery. It's like cue the serial music. Ding, 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 ding. When I first heard of Hitting the Nuts, I didn't know what to think.
I want to know, Brian, was it awkward to hear how attracted Bonnie was to me as she watched the preview?
If by awkward you mean slightly hot, then yes, because it's just like, man, I don't want to go too into detail, but I might have bought some overalls that I'm gonna rock tonight.
She thought I was so fat and gross.
No,
I was so surprised.
She thought you were.
No,
fantastic.
she thought you were so fantastic and great.
Girth-rate.
This is one of those. Justin was asking whether or not Bonnie was going to join us, and I'm like, she might. Don't know if that's great either way.
I was kind of hoping she was. She was so disgusted by me that I was confused by her reaction. I was kind of like yelling. I was all masked up with my headphones in a supermarket, listening to you, laughing through my mask, and then to the point where I was like, she has met me before, right?
Yeah.
I'm a human being to this person. She knows she's saying this about and to a human being, right?
Well,
but
and
also her. In other words, that the only thing that can make sense is that Bonnie met me, saw my wife, and was like, God, that guy got married and let himself go. That is the only explanation for how she could see me in the past and be like, who the fuck is that blob?
Well, and it's interesting because that character, very obviously, the belly is is part of the joke, right? Like the element, like that's.
It's another note I have for Bonnie. I wasn't miscast.
Yeah.
They weren't like, wait, we can't get Brad Pitt. I guess we'll give this to Matt Donnelly. That was not the thought process of it. Like, did Bonnie watch the Chippendale sketch with Chris Farley and be like, what is he doing on stage with Patrick Swayze?
These two aren't comparable at all. Patrick Swayze's a very attractive man. I don't get it.
Well, if I was to be give my most generous interpretation, I think that she knows you as a friend. And because she knows you as a friend, wants to say, "Oh, don't portray that. What are you doing? You're an attractive, awesome guy. Stop that.
Keep that belly in."
Yeah, it's also how to suck that in. He's like, "No, that's the joke."
Also, last time I was in Austin with you guys, I ended up taking my shirt off on stage for a laugh.
That's true.
It's not even outside of. It's not even outside of my wheelhouse that I would do this for laughter.
No, we all took our shirts off like this, and it was funny every time for different reasons.
Yes. I say this all the time when I was auditioning. They always like that. Whenever you're auditioning for something where it's funny to put fat guy next to models, and models talk about how they're objectified. I used to say I would love to take off my shirt and get a great reaction to it. But the reason why I'm here is because that's not what happens.
Yes, it is literally the opposite.
I remember back before Bobby Moynihan blew up, we were improvising. We were talking about how basically we're always just inches away from people sticking us in a diaper, putting wings on our back, and making us just roller skate.
Like that's always cause people to fall in love with your arrows.
That's always the role we're headed for, unless we like cut it off at the pass.
Well, okay, so talk me through, because it's always a fascinating experience to be listening to a piece of content that you just want to listen to unironically, and then suddenly they're talking about you, and sometimes they're giving you sass or whatever. Like was this a random interaction, or did somebody say, "Oh, you got to listen to what Bonnie the Invisible Wife is saying about you"?
I saw a comment on an Instagram post that just wrote, "Matt Donnelly is a confidence man, Bronny Brushwood."
Yes. Okay.
And I was like, what does that mean?
You do radiate confidence. I can vouch for that.
Sure. It's also long form for con man, but I also was like, get past that. I don't think that's where she's going. And then I went on the old Night Attack feed, and I only not listened to 2 episodes, and then I looked at the summary, and I was two back, and I was like in the summary. So I was like, okay, well, there I am.
well, what's funny is I'm actually in the same experience, getting caught up on Ice Cream Social, because Jacob said that when I called you to ask if that was okay, that became a topic of conversation. So turns out that the only thing more powerful than a collaboration video is just talking about other podcasters who definitely will listen to your episode.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt. Anybody who gets mentioned in anything, you're gonna watch or listen to it, right?
Oh, sure.
We're not. None of us are dealing with this in the volume that we have to strain it, right? Like we've got time for all of it, every morsel.
I check my replies on like 5 Twitter accounts. I am not close. I'm not close to being underwhelmed.
Well, all right. Let's actually get some background on hitting the nuts. What was hitting the nuts? Like we had no idea about this, and apparently it wasn't a secret. Although a lot of the scoops that follow us had not heard about it.
It's tough because like I was so the background is that it was a movie that my buddy Joe always wanted to make. Joe and me were cast in this thing for Hampton Hotels back when like a the internet
video?
was first like it was like like it was even crazier than that. So it was like hey, there's these things called viral videos on the internet. I think the move for this corporation to make is to go viral, and everyone's like, okay, let's form a committee to make viral videos. That's this era of the internet.
Hampton Inns.
Yeah.
Hampton Hotels.
Okay.
So Hampton Hotels had redone all of they basically were doing a whole revamp of everything they're providing for their things. And so someone came up with the idea of bedheads like deadheads and pitched it to Madison Avenue. And so I was one of 8 improvisers from a national casting who had to travel the country for 6 weeks of the summer as a bedhead, as a guy in pajamas touting the amazingness of Hampton Hotels.
Now, when you say bedhead, like you're recording bootleg audio of every hotel you've been in, you're constantly high on mushrooms, you're playing hacky sack. I'm a bedhead,
that was the
bro.
thing is, we never even made it into the hotel rooms. We just slept in the van. But we they put like our faces and wrapped like these vehicles, and we had to like go to like amusement parks and events that were happening around, and try to make videos of us interacting with people talking about Hampton Hotels. That was our deal.
All right, press pause. You had your face on a vehicle wrap? What is that like?
Yes. It was exciting at the time. And also, like in New York, we were on like a billboard for like a second. It was like a pretty good paying gig. It was a big commercial break for me.
I would imagine that is a payday, because
it was
number one, corporate money is always nice. Number 2, like if you pay by the hour and you're out on the road, that's a lot of hours.
Yeah, and this is like 15 years ago, so like big money is different now than then. And then, but also I was living in New York, so it was paying enough for me to leave New York for a couple months.
So how did they measure success? Where it's like somewhere middle management, you reported to somebody, and that somebody
Yes.
reported to somebody higher up, and
Yes.
that's the conversation I want to imagine. We got them. We hired these guys. They're the bedheads, and they're finally gonna accomplish blank for the bottom line. What the fuck do you put in that blank?
We could not figure that out as we were doing it. So like,
Which
there was
means
two
that nobody
crews. Yeah, as far as I know, they measured success in awards they got from like commercial awards. in which
Cleos.
this campaign.
Oh, they were fucking Clio hunting. So it was
Yes.
like, all right, so nobody's putting big money into digital. So this is a
Right.
way that the advertising firm can come back to Hampton Hotel and be like, hey, look, digital, it's emerging. So obviously we're not going to see the kind of return. But look, it was obviously great because we were the only people dumb enough to spend a nationwide tour's worth of money. And
Also,
they're like,
that's-
fucking nailed it.
15
That's
years
it.
ago,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would have been right at the birth of YouTube. Were these even on YouTube, or was this pre-YouTube?
No, pre-YouTube for sure. Because you were trying to get people to go to like Hampton.com or whatever to
Yeah.
watch it. So it
Because
was
that's
not
where you
like
really, that's
now.
where you want to enjoy hilarious video is at
And there was no-
Hampton.com.
Totally. And there was no social media of like super sharing anything. So it was like, how many page views did this get on?
How many hits? How many
Hampton.com
hits do we
slash-
get?
Exactly. This is exactly it. Yeah. This is exactly.
All right, so you are on the road, and then at some point, I guess the other guy, your other bedhead, has the idea for this movie.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, like, we were all thrilled to work with each other. And one of the things I did was like, I had already, because of doing this show called the Neutrino Video Projects, where we made like improvised movies happen live in theaters, had actually already like directed versions of that show and other improv theaters around the country at that time. So when we were all assigning responsibilities that we were going to do on the side for this road trip, I said, hey, I'm going to get us improv shows everywhere we go. So not only
that's
will we
great.
do this thing during the day, but for all of us to get cast together, we're all kick-ass improvisers. We should do shows. And so I got us shows in every market that we hit. And so we all got to improvise together. And it was a blast. And we're from New York, LA, Chicago. We're from all over the place. And so we really enjoyed working with each other. So Joe had a lot of ambition to make films. Joe Boyd, who plays the Amish guy in the film, is also the director. He actually went on to make a few more films. And he's like a retired minister. So some of them have a Christian bent. Hitting the Nuts does not have a Christian bent to it.
No,
So he wanted to get the gang back together, and so he basically cast us all in different roles in Hitting the Nuts, and I
So-
got cast as Dirty Rivers.
This movie, was it funded by somebody, or everything was bootstrapped,
Yes.
or what was the intent, like to hit the festival circuit, or?
Yes, it was meant to be a low budget film, privately funded by people who never funded a movie before, to become some kind of festival darling. And we almost nailed it, except for set dressing. Our trays were really out of date compared to the rest of the other things that we were shooting. And so our Rotten Tomato reviews just really took a downturn because
that was it.
those-
Yeah, everybody
those
was
TV
like on that
trays.
TV trays. They just pulled me right the fuck out. The writing, the acting, mwah, chef's kiss. But these fucking TV trays,
Okay.
just a goddamn eyesore.
Real quick. Bonnie's going to show up any minute now. We're going to have to pretend that the past 30 minutes hasn't happened. What was up with Bonnie's obsession with the TV trays?
It's like, listen, it's a flawed movie. I know it didn't blow up. We wanted it. We wanted it to blow up. But the last nit I thought would be picked would be the TV trays at the end of the
Yeah.
preview.
You remember in History of the World Part 1 when Mel Brooks is the stand-up philosopher and he is inadvertently making fat jokes about Caesar and his manager is going, get off fat. That was Bonnie's inner monologue when she brought up TV trays.
She was drowning and reaching for any branch, and that branch
Just
was
literally
TV
whatever, anything else. The TV, those don't look like TV trays to me. Can we spend 30 minutes on this?
It probably didn't help that we just constantly fed her more rope to hang herself on, but For whatever reason, she was obsessed with that.
Oh no, totally. No, that's crazy. So did it get picked up at any of the festivals or anything?
No, and this is I was kind of the 90s with on the backs of Tarantino and Kevin Smith. Everybody thought they were going to try to make independent films, and so there became this kind of like underbelly market thing that happens, which anyone who's made low budget independent films can do, is that you get into a couple of small festivals, maybe not big ones, and then you finally do get an offer for someone who's going to cut you in for a percentage of profit, but it's going to go straight to DVD. And it's your first time being introduced to this deal of, hey, the cost of advertising outweighed any of the money that it ever made, and you'll never make a dime, and we own this for 10 years, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And that happened with this film, and it happened with other films I've made as well. And no, I mean, it is, I think, a very funny film. I think if I were to go back in time, I'd say what we were making was a TV pilot and not a film, like it definitely is it's a nice little,
So
it's
looking back on it, it was a bit weird that you paused every 8 minutes for a commercial break in the middle of a feature film.
yeah. And I kept trying to fill that with advertising, but I couldn't get anybody to buy ads.
Yeah. No, it was awesome to see, especially just in the trailer. Like, you got that role is the like Will Ferrell, Melissa McCarthy, like there's like a big laugh whenever he shows up kind of role. At least it seemed like that from the trailer.
It was my it was my favorite thing, because that is it. They cast me in a role where there's no such thing as too big a choice. And especially at that point, at that stage in comedies, like when that was being produced or whatever to come out, like there was this like cleanup hitter comedy role where it's like, all right, there's the relatable guy, there's the person who's like instigating the plot, and then there's just this tornado that shows up every third scene and just fucking it's like a comedy detonation, and then just kind of like goes away and then shows up 3 scenes later. Yeah, and that was my favorite. I basically consider like the Ghostbusters 1 Bill Murray role, where your job is only to come in and swing for the fences and then go away.
Hey,
and
just crush it.
Can we throw a fan and a friend of ours under the bus? Meryl Barr had a hot take. Oh, no, it was John Rael. John Rael had a hot take that Ghostbusters is a garbage script, and that
Ghostbusters, that's stupid. That's a dumb take. That's a dumb take.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll have to have him back to defend.
You hate boys. I get it. You think boys' opinions on films are useless. Okay, fine.
Accurate. I do believe anything that Bonnie says, though. So the
P.S. I'm taking full credit for Diddleman being one of your listeners, by the way.
Yeah, that was a bit surprising to me. That he. Have you had this? And maybe this is to make a more general topic. Do you get weirded out when you're talking to someone and they say something that causes you to figure out that they listen to your podcast? Like, and up until that point, you didn't know that, but like, was that a reference? And then they drop another one, and you're like, oh, this is somebody who has heard hours and hours of unfiltered nonsense coming out of my mouth.
Yeah. I don't get subconscious, only that like I'm going to repeat myself, or I'm going to reintroduce concepts that they're well aware of, from listening to it.
I think the difference is that you are proud of your show and Brian's ashamed of
I just assume, all things being equal, that the odds are higher that I've said something that I would regret than not. Like
you have to think is that it's more strange for me for being the co-host of Penn Sunday School.
Oh, because you're on the hook for everything who is not you being said.
And like Titans listen to that show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Penn will be like, oh yeah, because Lawrence O'Donnell heard this, and so he and I was like, oh, LOD's listening to this podcast and suggesting his content.
How bad has it gotten? What is a moment? It doesn't have to be the best moment. You don't have to mention any names or whatever, but has there been a moment that you're like, oh, fuck, this person I respect definitely heard me say that thing?
Oh, I'll just tell you straight up. I have an idea for a kids movie that I'm trying to write with my wife that is meant to be like a children's parody of Ocean's 11. And
great idea.
and I, involving like Chuck E. Cheese tickets. And I was talking about it on air with Penn, and Penn's literally like, well, Brian Koppelman listens to this show. And I was like, okay, the guy who wrote Ocean's 11.
So do you find yourself reading? It's really more of an homage to the genius of Ocean's 11.
And like, I definitely didn't have my elevator pitch language down yet. I wasn't ready to try to like dazzle Koppelman on my homage to his work for sure. Where I was like, oh, I just blew that. It's basically how I felt. I was like, well, there goes that idea, because that won't get permission from here on out. So yeah, that's probably more the weirder one.
Yeah,
but
but
Diddleman was an early guest. I think he was like our second or third guest on Ice Cream Social.
And he's been on Abracababbled as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's super good.
The only thing I would say about Diddleman is I've known Diddleman since my old website, since the Magic website that I ran. Like, I interviewed him, like, he was like a reader of iTrick. So I don't know whether or not he followed from there.
Okay.
But but that would be the only thing with Diddleman, is that was, he was definitely a reader of mine from like back before he like actually exploded.
Have you ever?
I'd say
go ahead.
A stranger one for me is people I know who I'm friends with who will start listening like now.
Is that more upsetting, or which would you prefer? Somebody who's goes back to the beginning, or starts today?
No. But I mean that like they'll be like, oh, I didn't realize you had a podcast, and I've known them forever or whatever, and they'll start listening to Ice Cream Social back catalog, current and back at the same time to catch up, and you're like, oh, this is so weird, like that I'm taking up this space in your life suddenly. That's where I think it's the most weird.
That is the weirdest, mostly because whenever you meet somebody and you tell them, especially if you're like, oh, I make my living doing podcasting, right? The first thing they say is like, oh, that's great, I'll listen to it. And my initial reaction is
minor adjustment. First thing they say is, really? Then they say, I'll make sure to check that out.
Fair point. Or they'll usually be, it's like, because it is a cool job, right?
Like they go
be
like, yeah.
Oh, cool job. As if
I've sold pyramid scheme stuff too. I know you can if 5 people make a podcast for you, I know where this is going.
But my initial reaction is always horror. It's always like, they're like, oh, I'll listen to it. And it's like, no, you won't. No, don't. You shouldn't listen to it. Now that in my head is like, look, if you're actually interested, you're going to listen to it. I can't stop you. All I am doing right now is absolving myself of the obligation of the next time I talk to you, wondering whether or not you heard it and you hate it. Like, that's the only thing that I am doing. I'm saying to myself, I don't want to, the next time I talk to you, I don't want to be waiting for you to give me your review of the podcast, because I'm going to assume that you hated it. And if you never speak of it again, I would prefer to know that you never listened to it.
Do you lay out some landmines, to kind of see if is there something you can say to find out?
I run as far and as hard and as fast away from the conversation as possible. They're like, oh, you do it? I'm like, yes. They go, which one? And I'm like, well, it depends on what you like, blah, blah, blah. I should listen to it. No, you shouldn't. And let's never speak of it again. If you want to have a unsolicited compliment, great. But you can do that whenever, right? If you really like something, you'll say it. If not, I would prefer that we just never spoke of it.
For you, Justin, with your politics podcast, that has to be an even more of a doozy, because they have to either think that you've been polite to their faces while you're being more truthful on that podcast, or that you're doing takes on your podcast and you're not being real.
Yeah.
and they know the real you.
Well, and that's the other thing, is that, like, in general, the one thing about the politics podcast is that, unlike Night Attack, I can do a thing for them. Like, I have a home version of the game for the politics podcast where it's like, well, what do you think about blank? And I'll explain what I think about blank. And so that's fine. I don't mind that. It's not like, Ice Cream Social or Night Attack. People are like, oh, you do a comedy show. And you're like, yeah, Like, you can't be like, anyway, like, here's a fun game we play. Let me do like, hi, I'm Captain Morgan. Look at me. Like, I'm proving to you that I can do this now. Like, there's not that expectation. So I'm happy that I can have a sample platter for people that want to know that I know about politics.
I mean, unfortunately, when it comes to like the very best thing I hope for with somebody who's a Night Attack fan that wants to flash a banner is that they give us, the proper Diamond Club sign. You have fingertips inverted, touching, making a diamond or whatever. Like, that means, okay, you're cool and you get that's our sigil and you are part of the cool club. Man, what's hard is when somebody thinks, oh, I want to indicate that I've listened to the show, so let me think of the most embarrassing confession from either Brian or Justin that I am aware of, and then immediately throw it in their face. And it's just and what's funny is I'll oftentimes let it go past the first time. Like, somebody will be like, oh yeah, no, notice you got I saw your property, you got a big warehouse. And I'll walk right past it, and I'll be like, yeah, that's the soundstage. And they're like, yeah, but, it's a warehouse. And I'm just like, yes, I fucking talked about how I jerked off in a warehouse once. God damn it. Why are we? And I guess one of the other things, too, is so much of the DNA of Night Attack, and we've talked about this a little bit before, is about Justin and I sort of giving each other sass or whatever. And there's a sense of entitlement that for a brief while, a bunch of our crowd felt like whenever they met me in person, it's like, oh, what are all the insulting names Justin calls Brian? Let me use them affectionately the way Justin does. And of course, they don't come across very affectionately, and I was not a fan of it. So we had to correct everyone on what's appropriate.
That's the hard part, is them imitating the ball busting of your closest co-hosts, your closest friends in real life to you. And you're like, oh, okay. It's like, I try to be more accepting of that than I'm definitely, I'm laughing because any Scoops listening would be like, there's no one who's blocked more people on Twitter than me. But I try to be I try to be conscious of that, because the hard part is that I don't like blaming the listener for familiarity. Like, they are spending all the time with you, and they are hearing all the real things. And so they really do know you. That's not a fallacy, it's just but ball busting is still a relationship, an earned moment of trust in a relationship.
Right.
So it's hard.
And it's also like, even with, like, I've known Brian for 10 years. We built a empire on our friendship, right? Like,
yeah.
But even then, like, ball busting between each other takes timing and talent. Like, there are like thoughts and like rhythms that have to develop where I know Brian like is going to take this as a funny joke, and the joke has to be funny enough that this is going to be received well and not just as an insult. Like, that's just not a thing where I could just yell insults at Brian and everybody laughs. Like, there has to be a back and forth, and that's lost when that's the product, right? When that's all you hear, then you just think like, oh, I met Brian, let me just call him this name that Justin said.
And even then,
mean.
Even then, that can kind of be forgiven or easily corrected when, there's multiple iterations. There are multiple Sundays for us to get together at church and explain this is what we do and what we don't do or whatever. What's really wild is when you make guest appearances over on someone else's show. Like, for, Justin is a guest regularly on the morning stream. I show up over at the Whiskey Tribe channel or whatever. And I know over at the Whiskey Tribe, and probably both of you guys are aware of this, I inherently am attracted to people who give me sass. I find it interesting and I like them for it, right? What's very weird is out of a context.
Explains your marriage to Bonnie Brushwood to a T.
Yes. Oh, shit.
Still licking my wounds over here. I guess I should love her sass.
What's really wild is because I hang out with the folks at the distillery from the Whiskey Tribe, you get a bunch of the Whiskey Tribe folks who only know me as that's the guy who shows up and seems to love it when everybody calls him terrible names. And of course, I know that it comes from a place of affection and all that stuff, but it's unearned, where it's like, I'm just constantly being negged when I'm there. People come up and they're like, "Whoa, it's a celebrity." I mean, kind of. I guess. And it's like, and I'm like, I know, and it's like, that's a challenging situation for me.
I think it's hard because, Brian, for you, like all of my stuff still kind of fits into a Voltron of a singular endeavor. Like there's not one part of catching on to me and anything I'm up to that won't kind of add up okay going into the other. It's not like I'm a super clean family magician and then do Edge and Social.
Yes.
And it's not like working for Penn Jillette. The Penn's like the most cleaning, mouth person, whatever. And everything's kind of like in this realm of entertainment that if you discover one into the other, it doesn't necessarily conflict. Whereas like Night Attack is, your let loose place, your sacred place. And I think it does kind of take away from scam stuff spokesman and, business operator a little bit.
There's definitely that. The first question when anyone says they're a fan, the next words out of my mouth are, of what? So I can calibrate the remainder of the conversation.
Engage, choose your own adventure brain.
Yes.
Ready to open first box.
But I will say it's been really great to see, because you and Matt, you and Paul had a relationship a long time before you started making comedy on the internet, right?
Certainly. And also that the inviting people to an improv show is not dissimilar to having people listen to your podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like you kind of like go like, we do this thing, you're going to see that people love it and you might not get it, was already a feeling that he and I had shared for a decade before we went on the internet with stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the things that weirdly I'm proud and confused about how I feel is, the story of Night Attack and all of its previous incarnations. The world got to watch live as Justin and I fell in love with each other and became friends.
Aww.
And that means some very
Do you need me to dress up
wonderful-
like Cupid right now and shoot you two with arrows?
It depends.
Well,
Well,
let's
fantastic.
Let's see if this Kiddie Ocean's 11 screenplay pans out. But at that point, you might have to cash in that final coupon.
But I guess what I'm saying is that it's been a very warts and all experience, and I'm going to guess that the Justin Bryan story has a few more warts visible in public than the Matt and Paul story.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, we're pretty out there. Although Paul really, I think actually more than me, just really puts it all out there for everybody.
Paul's raw. Paul is raw on like having talked to you guys off mic.
Yeah.
Like I would say that the closest that there is to an unvarnished, like both you and Jacob have heightened elements of yourself that are on the mic. I kind of feel like Paul is Paul 100% of the time, and that means
like
the negative stuff too.
Yeah. Like there's times I have to remind him, like, we are on air and our job is to try to be amusing to people. Because there's no difference between him on air and off air. And if he gets going, he gets going. If he doesn't get going, so be it. This is him.
Yeah.
The comedy golem.
The comedy golem, which I thought you guys were destroying our show when you explained that to him.
Oh, you kidding me? No, it was. I mean, I hope we didn't break anything. I hope it's okay. That's a laugh that said it wasn't.
No. It's totally fine. No, I mean, I think what's fascinating is
that laugh was that they didn't know it was going to be fine when you started talking. Like that's what the laugh was.
Bingo. Accurate there. No, if anything, it's like all four of us can look back reflecting on that of getting into podcasting as early as we did, which at the time we didn't feel like it, right? I felt like we were late to the party. You must have felt like you were late to the party on podcasting a little bit, no?
Oh, sure. Everybody, as a matter of fact, I thought I was late to YouTube because I started in 2006 and YouTube was 1 year old by then. So clearly it was already too late.
Right. I mean, and so what's interesting now is that you see everyone who has like such a more like refined elevator pitch idea of what a podcast is. And you were like, oh, wow, I just came roaring in and laid it all out and like figured it out as we went along. And you're almost like looking at these new people. You're like, oh, like Paul and I would have such an easier job with like a hook, you know, of like what we do and show prep and stuff.
Yeah, but I think you do have a hook. It's just one of those things where it's like you don't discover it until after you're already doing it. Like for you guys, if I were to pitch Ice Cream Social, it is unvarnished, unfiltered, completely honest, completely hilarious, behind the scenes talk of all things Vegas. And that is a niche that nobody else occupies, and that's what I love the most about the authenticity that you guys bring.
Yeah, I think if anything, we've learned to kind of put our hooks into the behind the scenes Vegas angle as we went on, for sure, which I don't think was there in the beginning at all. You know, like we were a spinoff of Penn Sunday School, and Penn Sunday School, even that started as a post bullshit era Penn and Teller podcast. So that even it being called Penn Sunday School, it's like super atheist Penn, and you know, that kind of stuff. And it's actually like that podcast has evolved more than any other podcast because he evolves so much. So that like we were like, if you look at old bios, it's like got like godless comedians and all this other stuff in there because we think we're trying to like wave our flag around the fact that we're attached to Penn, and it's just not where we're at anymore. And so yeah, we hooked in that. In fact, someone has a joke. We asked for like bad names of our renaming our podcast, if ice cream, since everyone used to always jokingly bitch about our lack of ice cream, and someone brought up Vegas parking and weather, and I fell over laughing because I was like, holy shit, I would love if our podcast was called Vegas Parking and Weather and was the exact same format. Like it was as ridiculous and over the top or whatever. But like I love it.
So how did you ever? I don't know how much of your story you talk about on Ice Cream Social. Have you ever talked about how you fell into the whole Penn orbit and ended up being the co-host of Penn Sunday School?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's been a while, but yeah. I mean, yeah. So I moved out here to Vegas in 2008. My wife was in Jersey Boys, girlfriend at the time, but we moved out here from New York. Thought I was going to go to LA to be a sitcom star. Never made it there. You saw the results of it. Bonnie figured it out. I was too ugly to be one of those people. And
I'm only sad that Bonnie's not here to get this abuse in person. I'm gonna have to. She'll not hear about it.
No, and I got into Wayne Brady's show. So I was improvising with Wayne Brady at the Venetian
talk show, or
no,
show?
He had a live improv show at the Venetian. Emily Gillette's Penn's wife went to Wayne's show for one of her birthdays, and we met afterward or whatever. And then she started going to improv shows around town, and I was basically in like every improv show in town because I moved here. I just hopped into like everything I could get my hands on. And so she was like, "You're funny," and started inviting me around Penn. The long story is,
at the time, I know you were a fan of his radio show, so you weren't just a Penn and Teller fan. Like you were listening to Penn pontificate for hours at a time in a single mic environment. Yeah,
definitely. And his Mike Goudot, his radio co-host and current Penn Sunday School co-host, his wife was in Mamma Mia with my wife, and so there was like a connection there to it. And I got around his orbit. And it was a weird, weird evolution where at first I was just one of the hang-arounders. When people are famous, they have hang-arounder people. I don't know if that's been explained on a podcast.
Looking forward to my first. It's going to be great.
But there are people who just kind of casually know how to like hang out in your orbit without overstepping into friendship territory and not be weird enough that you have to go.
Right.
And I got into that orbit. And that happens around famous people. And I don't know if it happens.
So how does that next step happen? Because I think there's a number of times I've felt that orbit around people, but then at what point is it like, hey man, let me just show up on your show and then become a vital part of it?
Yeah, who the fuck does that?
Outside, okay, we're describing the Justin Robert Young story. All right.
Yeah.
So I was going to movie night at Penn's house. Which kind of ended up being like everyone's trying to make each other laugh, but the truth is we're all just trying to make Penn laugh. And I get the hang of the rules, and I start making Penn laugh a lot. But I'm still in like hanger-on or orbit right around the time he gets the Penn and Teller get a Discovery Channel show called Penn and Teller Tell a Lie.
Would it be fair to say that everybody's pretending like it's movie night, but really it's just a writer's room?
No, it was for like me and maybe other funny people who show up, but other people who aren't as funny just wanted to hear Penn be funny.
Got it.
And so it's really Penn's stand-up time. And if anything, when I first was trying to joke around and getting laughs, and he didn't actually like me because it was like not my turn to be that guy in movie night yet.
It's Sinatra, and he's got everybody around the table, but he's holding court, and you got to figure out how you're adding and not subtracting from the reason why everybody's
I also
there.
like Jack Daniels there, Frankie. So I can also drink a lot.
I jerked off at a warehouse once.
See, you wouldn't have lasted night one, Brian. You would have been the fuck out of there.
Or I would have been at the front of the line. I don't know.
So people used to be like, you go to Penn's house all the time and you guys are friends? I go, no, friends don't know every single time they've made another friend laugh. But I had
and then you pull out your tally. Like
I had
all
an
the hash marks.
exact tally of like, I was very much grading myself the way Jordan would grade his games, the way I graded my participation at movie night. So when he got Tell a Lie, I was just close enough to be in his orbit, but not close enough it was awkward to ask. I basically wrote an email begging to intern on it. And I wrote Penn, Teller, and Godot, who was working. I wrote all three. I just said, let me do anything. Let me pick you up. Let me get coffee. Can I just be around your show? And Godot, to his credit, was like, that's exactly how I started hanging out, was in Sin City Spectacular. I know Matt. I like Matt, so I have no problem with him being around. And Penn and Teller said, sure, give it a shot. And so I was an intern on that for their, meetings at like Starbucks and other coffee meetings and stuff like that, and keeping notes and stuff.
This is all unpaid. Like you just showed up and started helping.
Just being in the orbit. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is something to be said to that whole Project Mayhem idea of hey man, show up for 3 days, no food, no water, no encouragement. If you're still there, you're in. And our current ops manager at the property just showed up one day, and he was like, "Seems to me like you need an ops manager." I'm like, "We'll see." No food, no encouragement, no water, and then 6 months later, I was like, yeah, I don't know how to run stuff without him. and so then at that point, I started writing checks.
Yeah, I think and it just seems like that's like the way show business works. Like it's like the first person, whenever you're part of any endeavor around New York or LA, the first person to be like, oh, I have to bartend on Saturday, I can't make it, loses.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such about like whoever doesn't need a job. And it favors the people whose parents can float people through NYU and all that kind of stuff. It just favors that class. And so my wife was killing it at Jersey Boys. We were living on a Las Vegas budget. She agreed to let me live an intern lifestyle for this.
I would also imagine, as we are being joined by the star of the show, Bonnie Brushwood, that when it comes to TV in Vegas, like Penn and Teller are among the only people that keep getting like television productions for which are entirely created, written, and produced in Vegas. Like they're the only people that I can think of outside of specials. That
was my begging for internship letter, was saying like, I moved here from New York. I was going to move to LA. I couldn't. I'm here sticking out with my wife at Jersey Boys. Please let me be around a television show. Just please let me intern. I just want to be around a television show in any capacity, was basically my pitch to them.
Ladies and gentlemen, joining us on the Quad Laser just right now in studio, rocking a very fashionable hat, it's Bonnie the Invisible Wife, who wants to explain just how fantastic she thought
Bonnie,
I looked.
Bonnie, your mic. I don't know if your mic is on. We need to make sure that this is all documented. Everybody can hear.
Should be good.
Bonnie, just so you know, I actually played my wife the clip, and we actually did a workout today. She wanted to get me back in shape. I started lifting some weights. We did some weird kettlebell drills. I didn't realize how offensive I was to the human eye for the past 10 years.
I said you're fantastic.
Personality. I know.
No,
I'm a good guy as you pat me on the shoulder. I know.
Great personality. Everyone talks about it.
I gotta say though, at first I was just like, man, his wife is super hot. and then you like strut along, and I'm like, oh no, it's the confidence. Everybody likes confidence.
My wife
is amazing. So totally.
My wife heard your quote of like, but he has a hot wife. She's like, I don't get it. She's like, she's saying I'm too ugly for you. Is what she's saying.
Does not compute. Does not compute. Comparative hotnesses are not in alignment.
My only fear is that like you're right and she just figured it out. You might have just ended my marriage. I don't know.
I doubt that. Your confidence still is very attractive. So you go for it.
That's right. We actually met on an app called FromTheNeckUp.com. So that's actually that's where we.
Oh my God! No, I apologize for being a stinker.
I was laughing so hard. I literally was like a weird guy laughing through my mask in the supermarket.
Oh, you
just
were listening to it?
Yeah, I had to go hunt it down.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
I just want you to know that the role called for someone who looked like me, Bonnie. It wasn't a mistake to put me in a shirtless outfit. That was the idea.
No, I totally get that. Yeah, no. Anyways, I think you're great.
And also, I'm going to pass the mic. I have the person who did the set dressing, who brought in those TV trays. You can also talk to them.
Oh,
okay,
yeah. It's fucking TV trays.
I
was like, whenever we look at why that film didn't make the swing that we wanted it to, we should be looking at those TV trays, knowing that's what doomed us. That's what took us down.
That was Sundance. They were all in.
Yeah.
They were like, and it got right up to the TV trays, and they just hit fucking stop, eject, right in the trash.
Redford himself was like, I have those TV trays, and we were dead in the water.
Fuck him.
I sell those TV trays. What are they trying to do?
Oh my God. Well, I'm just saying you need to, hook them up.
Do a sit-up. I know, Bonnie. I know.
Put them run over him with the truck a couple of times. Not you, the TV trays.
I feel like you don't need to rule out one with the other, Bonnie. I get it.
All right. We're almost on an hour.
Anyways.
Thank you so much, Matt Donnelly, for joining us. Everybody go check out Ice Cream Social.
Matt.
You guys are the best people ever.
Love you guys.
We love you guys.
Love
Thank
you too.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Bonnie, I'm going bald too, just so you know.
Confidently though.
Confidently bald.